Welcome to the Sentai Podcast with your hosts Sam and Jay. We're here to discuss our favorite anime, interview industry figures, and a whole lot more. Visit sentai.com/podcast to see what we're all about. Today we're talking to Ben Applegate of Kadancha, USA about Vinland Saga.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sentai Podcast. I'm your host, Sam. I'm here with producer Tom and Ben Applegate of Kodansha, USA. We are so excited to be here with you to talk about manga. You are the publisher of Vinland Saga, which is one of our favorite titles. We're really excited to dig into that. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam. It's a delight. I love manga, and I especially love Vinland Saga. So I jumped at the chance to get a chance to talk more about this very special series.
Yes, I have my copies sitting next to me as a prop. I can refer to them easily. And you do too. There it is. Yes. Oh, I love the covers on these, and I love the different colors used on the spines. By the way, they look really cool lined up on a shelf.
Thank you very much. That's an innovation by our cover designer, Phil Balsman, who actually created the little animal designs, the little knot on the front cover. Those are his creations.
That's so cool.
I don't know if you wanted to jump in if you wanted to ask some questions before I jumped into the very esoteric anecdotes, but if you look at the last page, you can see that knot in a round pattern.
That's so neat, though.
That's actually what's called an ownership tag, which is something that Vikings left on items of value, and the runes on there are accurate. I don't know if this website is still up, but when we first started publishing the series, there was a website you could go to that would teach you how to fill in your name in the blank so that your copy of Vinland Saga could be yours, and you could write your name in Viking Runes.
I had no idea when we started recording that we were going to go in this direction, but mind blown. This is delightful. Thank you for sharing that. That's exactly the kind of thing I like knowing about stuff. The little things you've worked in there as little publishing flourishes are so interesting, and that's so neat that y'all did that.
Well, I think it goes to show how excited everyone was to have this series finally out in English. I mean, It's easy to forget now, but at the time it had already been going for several years in Japan before it got licensed in the United States. And I mean, it's still going because Yukimura Sensei only finishes 2 Japanese volumes per year. And since we're publishing it as 2-in-1s, that means 1 book per year. From us.
Right.
And if you listen to him in interviews, he says his life's ambition is to finish Vinland Saga before he dies. So we're all rooting for that.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
But he's in no rush. He wants to do it right, and I think that really is visible when someone is taking their time and doing comics art right. It's obvious, and I think that's clear to any reader of Vinland Saga too.
I completely agree. I was just idly flipping through my volumes before we got started, and the amount of love and care that has gone into the illustration, but also into how they are produced here, is pretty evident just the minute you open the volume. So, so backtracking a little bit. Let's familiarize the audiences with you and who you are and why you're here. We're so excited to get to Vinland Saga. We just zoomed straight past that.
I know. All my fault.
No, not your fault at all. I'm the podcast host. I'm supposed to have the reins and be, making things go a certain way. So that's on me. So tell me, how did you end up working in the world of manga? Was it something that you were interested in before you started working where you work? Tell us your origin story, as it were.
Sure. So I'm Ben Applegate. I can't remember if I said that part before I started blathering about Vikings. I'm the director of publishing services for the Kodansha print team. I almost said Kodansha Comics, but actually Kodansha underwent rebranding this year, and now it's just Kodansha. So all the old imprints are getting folded into the brand new Kodansha brand, which I'm very excited about. Actually, I think it's a really cool project. But I've been working on Kodansha's books for 9 years. It'll be 10 next year.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. And I started out as an editor. So way back in 2012, I was hired as a manga editor. And at that time, the program was 3 years old. Still pretty new, but we were doing a bunch of exciting things. Vinland Saga, of course, being one of them. Attack on Titan being another. I started editing the English edition of that series at volume 2.
Oh, wow.
So that's been a journey. As you know, the last volume of that is coming out this year, and we just royal work on that English edition. So it's been an emotional couple of months, to be honest with you.
It's such a mega series too. I must have been just such a treat to work on, seeing how fans really, glommed onto it as soon as it started. I mean, from the first episode, really, yeah.
From the first episode, yeah, it's telling that you used the word episode because it was really something. I was at Anime Boston, I think, a few weeks after the anime had premiered, and I already saw cosplayers. It was like flicking a switch that anime started, and all of a sudden Attack on Titan was everywhere. I mean, you probably are aware of that, but it was really something to watch because I cared about the series and I was putting a lot of work into it, but to see all of a sudden everyone knows it was really amazing. And there's a lot to sink your teeth into on Attack on Titan from a
pun intended
a localization standpoint. Yes, exactly. But there's a lot of interesting dialogue and like allusions to history and cycles of violence and the brutalization of children that takes place in war. And actually, some of these themes are also common to Vinland Saga, although they're treated in very, very different ways.
Yeah, definitely.
But to answer your question, my origin story. So before that, I was a freelance manga translator. And I worked at Digital Manga Publishing. I did the first three of their Kickstarter campaigns I managed back in the day for Swallowing the Earth, the Osamu Tezuka reprint. And then we did Barbara, which just got a live action film adaptation, the Tezuka manga, and Unico, which is the character he created for Sanrio. And if you're familiar with Phoenix, like Osamu Tezuka, he thinks that children can really handle anything.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Unico goes to some dark places for a all color, bright and shiny, cutesy story about a flying unicorn.
Right.
But I highly recommend that manga. It's so good. But before that, I was actually in journalism. I worked for an English language newspaper in Korea for 3.5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I found that the reason I mentioned that, I was a copy editor and I did some writing, very small amount of writing. And then I was the culture desk editor there for a while. And I learned some things about myself, which was that I was never going to make it as a journalist.
Oh, no.
Incredibly difficult work and just requires a constitution that I didn't think I had.
Right.
But I do think that work prepared me very well for manga publishing. If anyone knows about book publishing, prose publishing, it can be kind of a sleepy business. You finish up a novel and then a year later or a year and a half later, it's finally come out because there has to be publicity and there have to be advanced reader copies and all these other things have to happen. With manga, on the other hand, we're putting out a volume and then another one comes out 2 months later. So it actually is, I found the skills I acquired working in a daily newspaper to be pretty applicable because things really come at you pretty quickly and you've got to be able to handle it. So that's my journey. I kind of did that in reverse. Sorry. But for a little while in there, I was also a tour guide running nerdy tours of Japan, which was a lot of fun. But I first started studying Japanese in college. I spent my junior year abroad in Kyoto and then did the journalism thing and always thought I was going to end up working on East Asian politics or history.
Okay.
And then I fell into this very nerdy career instead. And I've been extraordinarily happy ever since to get to work on all this stuff. So.
I'm so glad you found your niche. That's amazing.
This is my whole, yes.
Yeah. So what does an average work day look like for you? Like, what are some of the responsibilities you manage? So yeah, tell us more about that.
Sure. So my employer is actually Penguin Random House, which is the distribution and sales service provider for Kodansha. And we also do the editorial and production on some of their print program. So I run a team that does the editorial work and the production work on most of the manga that Kodansha publishes.
Okay.
So every day is a little bit different, which is just how I like it. I could be looking at logos for a new series and giving feedback to an editor and a designer. I could be doing a read of a volume 1 to, proofread it. I could be handling some kind of technical issue. I could be reading potential titles in Japanese to make recommendations to Kodansha as to what to publish. I mean, they're the ones who make all the final decisions, but they do rely on our advice on what might work or might not work in the US market. Right. So it really is a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it's fantastic. I'm never bored, not for a second. As an editor back in the day, it's much more project by project. So you are looking at a script when it comes in from the translator. You're communicating back and forth with the translator as necessary. That goes to a letterer who will get the Japanese language files and put the English text on them. And then when that comes back to you, you're responsible for going through it, with a fine-tooth comb and making sure there are no errors, but also, tweaking the dialogue here and there so that it can fit into the balloons.
Right.
Issue. Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, in Japan, manga, of course, the dialogue is vertical. It's written in vertical lines right to left, which is why Japanese manga is printed backwards,
right?
Quote unquote. But in the US, of course, we don't write in vertical lines.
Nope.
So if you open a volume of Vinland Saga or of Attack on Titan or any number of other manga, if you notice those very vertical balloons,
right,
it can be real tough to work with, especially if you've got a character just saying the word enough or though or any number of these other English language words that have one syllable and like 7 letters in them.
Right. We encounter something similar in anime. The subtitle will last for half a second, but it has, a 19-word translation. And so, nope, they're not going to be able to read that in that amount of time. So what do you do? And I have looked at manga and seen some of the creative ways you've done layout for text. So that does not seem like an easy job. You have your work cut out for you for sure.
The letterers are incredibly talented people. And what they're able to do with the files that come in and the way they're able to strike a balance, because of course they can't be done the same way as American comics.
Oh, of course.
It's a totally different game. And Scott Brown, who does the lettering for Vinland Saga, is one of our absolute veterans, a total professional. And he told me once when he had received, I think we were on book 3 or book 4. I try to call the US ones book because they are actually 2-in-1s.
Right.
But he said this is the only series he works on where he reads the whole script first before he gets started on the book because he has to know what happens.
Oh, wow. What a glowing recommendation of the title in that case. Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you a few things about describing the process of bringing manga to an overseas audience and then like challenges of adapting Vinland Saga. And you kind of hit both of those points a little bit in talking about, the text and a bit of the process of how to bring it over. But is there anything else in terms of trying to bring something to US audiences that maybe people would not expect goes into that process?
Oh, sure. So, well, I mentioned the ownership tags and all that stuff. There's actually also some Viking runes at the top.
Yes,
and this is an Easter egg that no one has ever cracked. So that's a challenge for your readers. I'm not going to say anything more about it, but if you happen to know your Old Norse, you want to give that a...
Well, I know what I'm doing the rest of the workday. I've got this in my hand, and I got to put that aside so I don't stare at it the rest of this interview wondering what secrets does it hold. There's
a thank you note in the back to a professor who helped us out with that at the University of Nottingham in the UK. So that's one thing, is there was a lot of cultural research that goes into this. We took seriously our responsibility to produce an accurate localization in English because Yukimura Sensei took his responsibility to get the details right so seriously.
Right.
His afterwords are some of the most interesting I've ever read in any manga, because he goes into his trips to Iceland and other parts of Europe and the work he did in finding out how Vikings lived their lives, not just the stereotype with the horned helmets, which of course they didn't really wear, but the actual daily lives of not just Viking men, but Viking women and families and farmers and all the people who we don't see represented in pop culture depictions of Vikings. There's a very funny afterword where he talks about not being able to find any information about how Vikings pooped.
It's something so mundane. I guess they thought they never needed to write that down.
It's like, this is a key detail that I'm missing. Like, I can't find any details about Viking toilet paper,
Yeah.
So
that's wild.
So a lot of research went into that. And I have to credit the translator. I know I mentioned the letterer, but Stephen Paul is another consummate professional, long-time manga translator. If you've been reading manga for any length of time over the past 15 years, you've encountered his work. And he does a wonderful, wonderful job with this. So when I read when I heard from you what you'd be asking me on this podcast, I almost felt, well, this is cheating a little bit, because really Vinland Saga is one of the easy ones. I don't really have to do a whole lot to this series.
Right. Yeah. There's so much content here to mine for,
Got two great people on it already.
Right. Yeah. It's nice, though, that you're getting to shout them out a little bit. I'm sure that it might be a bit of a thankless task. No one ever sees you necessarily behind the desk translating and typesetting and working on this. So, yeah, I bet they appreciate that shout out for sure.
I mean, there are an unbelievable number of hardworking people who put their heart and soul into producing these English language versions. And I've learned a ton from working with each one of them, and just like how clever and knowledgeable and funny they can be. There's a series that we're putting out right now called Sweat and Soap.
I'm familiar with Sweat and Soap. Oh, yes.
And Matt Trevout is the translator's name on that series, and the ways that he finds to strike just the right tone in English stun me every time. Because we're not just translating the words on the page, right?
Right.
Our goal is to replicate the reading experience.
Right.
So we want an English reading person to have the same experience emotionally and in terms of their connection to the characters that a Japanese reader would have reading the Japanese edition.
Right.
And that doesn't mean putting the same words on the page.
Right.
Right. It means paying attention to what characters call each other, and does this person use? I mean, to be very simple about it, does this person use contractions? How do we represent the relationships between characters purely through dialogue? And I'm sure this is something you face in anime too.
Yes.
In the Japanese language, it's very easy to tell kind of these relationships of respect and senpai kohai, because it's right there in the language. But in English, it takes some more finesse.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to read the subtext. There's a lot of nuance to it. You can't just, a one-to-one translation. We've had people say like, oh, that wasn't a one-to-one translation. Why didn't you translate it like this? And it's like, well, that one-to-one doesn't get across the subtext in a meaningful way to English speakers. So, right.
And it's one of those things too, where I find, I mean, I know fans can be kind of scary on this topic sometimes.
At times.
But I have found that when you have a reason for what you're doing, you do it deliberately, and you sit down and explain what that reason was. Most of the time, everybody's then on the same page, right? Because the reason people react strongly is that they care deeply about this material and how it's represented. And so when they think it's not being treated with respect, that understandably can make them pretty angry.
Right.
And
that's such a passionate fan base in anime manga. So passionate.
They just want to know that you care as much as they do.
Exactly. Yes.
And that you're making choices on purpose.
Right. Yeah. It's not some willy-nilly words on the page. No.
Right.
There's reasons behind everything. So are there any particular challenges in adapting Vinland Saga for an English-speaking audience that we haven't covered yet that you would like to get into?
So back when we were first starting to publish the series, we really wanted to make sure that it was packed full of bonus content.
Right.
But like I've been saying, the story and the setting are so deep. We wanted to make sure that people were getting a lot of bang for their buck. And at the time, it was actually Kodansha Comics' first hardcover release.
Oh.
Certainly the first time we were releasing in hardcover a manga that had never been published in English before.
Okay.
So we did that, again, very deliberately in order to give it a higher value. And we scoured Yukimura Sensei's published works for more things that we could offer, which is why the first 5 volumes have, for our Farewell is Near, the bonus story about the samurai, serialized in the back, and why Yukimura Sensei so graciously agreed to do a Q&A just with us, an original interview in the back of almost every volume of the English release.
That really did impress me about these volumes. I've collected the first half dozen or so, I think, at this point, and every one of them has that little one shot at the back. I was like, I did not expect that at all. I got to the end and go, okay, that's it. Wait a second. What is this hidden gem back here? The amount of love and care that has been put into this is so obvious, even from, I work in the world of anime, but I'm still not a manga, creator or manga licensor like you are. So, but it's obvious to fans. I just want you to know it's appreciated from the point of view of someone who really loves manga. This is primo stuff right here. So thank you for putting that amount of detail into it.
Thank you. That means a lot. I'm endlessly grateful to Yukimura Sensei for the attention that he's paid to the U.S. release and the assistance that he's provided. I don't know if you saw in the back of Volume 1, there are also those photos of him accepting an award for the series, where he actually dresses as a Viking warrior.
I have it right here.
Yeah.
It's right there.
They're fantastic.
He
actually goes up, accepts the award, and then pulls a string, and these confetti cannons go off on his back. Yeah.
That's so cool. What a stylish guy.
Absolutely. Wow. He's a really rad dude. Yes, indeed.
I was going to ask you if there were any funny anecdotes about the production of Vinland Saga, but that's pretty hilarious right there. I love that.
That is a really fun fact. Usually that's my shtick, but I don't have any.
Producer fun facts Tom always tries to slide in a fun fact, but yeah, you've got the market cornered on that, Ben. Thank you. So backing off of Vinland Saga, so manga is having a moment in the sun, you might say. It has exploded in popularity. People are always talking about volumes selling out. They can't get enough of them. And I know there have been some like supply line issues that have been contributing to that. But what do you think has contributed to this sudden explosion of popularity in manga?
Wow. I mean, that's the question at the moment that everyone is asking themselves, because the level of sales increase is something beyond what anyone could have dreamed. I mean, I'm an optimist, and I have been for years, watching the manga industry gain ground every year. And I thought there was still a ways to go, but I did not see coming that it would explode the way it has.
Right.
Last year, once the peak COVID, the peak lockdown part of the year was over with, we saw sales come roaring back as people, were stuck inside and needed entertainment. And we had the best holiday season. The manga category had the best holiday season ever. But the thing was, the line didn't go back down again. We ended 2021. It just kept going up like nothing I've ever seen. So yes, that's the fundamental reason why manga is sold out everywhere. And any answer that I give you, I am going to answer this question, but just to this is pure speculation on my part. Mm-hmm. So I don't know the answer to this. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of market research done by people who have more resources and knowledge than I do in the next few months. But if I had to say, I would guess anime has always been the big driver of manga sales. And so in terms of specific titles, the titles that are getting popular anime, of course, that drives sales. Attack on Titan, the anime coming back, made Attack on Titan Volume 1 the top-selling manga of the first half of the year.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, even, nearly a decade after it first came out, it's back on the top of the sales charts again. I think that when people were stuck indoors, and I know this because I went through it myself, as all of us did.
Me too.
You search for a community to be a part of. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest, easiest to get into communities online is the anime and manga fandom. So when you're stuck indoors, it's easy to get sucked into, that fandom, and then you start buying books. And just anecdotally, I have colleagues who are more senior than me at Penguin Random House who don't work with manga, and whose teenage children have all picked up manga in the last year.
Wow.
The thing I say to make people laugh or groan is that it's very easy to have a anime streaming tab up behind your distance learning. So
yes, when you put it that way, suddenly it all falls into place, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I went to Barnes & Noble the other day, and the cashier, as I was checking out, said, "Okay, you're an adult." I was like, "Wow, you're asking me for my opinion?" Wow, because I had this stack of manga, the size of my torso, barely exaggerating. Plopped it down, and he goes, "Okay, so you're an adult. What's the appeal here? What's going on?" Because this is the thing that we cannot keep on shelves. We've had to, rearrange to make more shelves. It's the thing that everyone's bringing up. It's, a lot of younger people, but also adults. So tell me what's going on. And I just looked at him and I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I wish I knew. But I ended up explaining, some of its appeal. And some target audience, blah, blah, blah. Here's some shows and volumes you should pick up if you want to get curious. And he was like, I might. There's so many people who seem to love it. So it's sort of transcending. He was an older gentleman, too. I think it's sort of transcending some demographic barriers there.
I'm surprised you didn't sit him down and give him the whole story from Astro Boy to Zoids.
I know. Give him the full Tezuka experience, huh? Oh, I did tell him my favorite titles, though, that were on the shelves. It was like, this is a good one to recommend to people who like this stuff. And I just went all over his head. But, he tried. And I think that's what matters here, for sure.
You can definitely tell which comic shops have someone who knows manga and which ones don't.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's got to be hand-sold. You got to know the category.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think, given it's having this moment in the sun, it's having this big blow up, where do you think it's going? Where's the world of manga headed from here?
Well, in terms of sales numbers, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going back to pre-2020 numbers. Mm-hmm. I think that we are going to end somewhere up.
Yeah.
I don't think that the current state can continue forever. I think once folks are back in school, maybe, then sales will slow down a bit. Mm-hmm. But I'm still an optimist. I think that the category is really robust and healthy, with a great deal of diversity of content at the moment. And so if you were to ask me about the thing I'm most excited about, it's that diversity of content and the fact that before, just to give an example, there was really only a market for high school romance. If you're selling a romance manga, there's really only a market for the high school setting, mm-hmm. A little bit of funny, a little bit of drama. Maybe the guy is kind of a bit of a jerk, like that kind of story.
That old chestnut, yeah.
Yeah, but now we're living in a time when one of the top selling romance manga is Wotakoi.
I knew you were going to say Wotakoi.
Which stars some 20-somethings who are really into nerdy pursuits and video games. And so there's that. And then, of course, the great rise in LGBTQ manga, BL manga, Yuri manga in the past few years, essay manga, which all of this stuff is a Venn diagram that overlaps. Stuff like My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. And to throw a Kodansha title in there, Boys Run the Riot, which mm-hmm. we just started publishing in the end of May. If you haven't heard about this one, it's about a trans teen who starts his own fashion brand, his own street fashion brand, because wearing the clothes that he's picked out is the only time he can feel like himself.
That's beautiful. And
it's a 4-volume series written by a trans creator. So there's a lot of very deeply personal feelings going into this story. And I'm overjoyed with how the localization turned out, because it was spearheaded by Tiff Joshua Ferrantini, one of our editors, who made sure that the entire localization team was trans or non-binary.
For my personal purposes, can you say that in title one more time? The name
Boys
of it?
Run the Riot.
Boys Run the Riot. So I'm a non-binary person. I happen to be. So as you were talking, I got a little misty just because representation is so important. And that is so great that y'all went to that length to have that representation behind the scenes. Because when you staff people behind the scenes who know what this content is about, have a vested interest in it, and are passionate about it because it applies to them, it absolutely shines through on the page. So as a member of that community, thank you for being supportive of that. That's honestly, that makes my day. I can't stress that enough.
I will pass that along to TJ. All of the plaudits go to them for putting so much care into the pitch and the release. So
give TJ every ounce of my love and appreciation. Please, please, please. Yeah. Speaking of diversity in romance titles, though, I'm loving Perfect World right now, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect World is so good. That it's mm-hmm. about a couple. One of them is paraplegic or has a spinal cord injury and is wheelchair bound. And so it's about their relationship as they deal with that and how it impacts a relationship. And that is a beautiful title. I have been so impressed with y'all's release of that. So I wanted to pass that along, too.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to the editor of that series as well. But that one, the main character, he's an architect. And so there's an opportunity to work in a lot of commentary about accessibility issues in Japan, which is something the author did a lot of work on. Yeah.
Yes. So do you have a personal favorite genre of manga that you like seeing come through? It doesn't have to be in a big one. Just what's your personal fave?
Well, I mean, I'd like to keep going with actually kind of a similar vein of what we've been talking about.
Please do.
Unique or just really good romance titles.
Yeah.
A Sign of Affection is one that has given me a lot of comfort, I guess, over the past year in the pandemic. A Sign of Affection is about a deaf college student who meets a guy on the train who happens to be one of her classmates. And they kind of start orbiting around each other and getting to know each other a little bit more. And the reason they're drawn to each other is he's a global traveler. He's multilingual. He really loves learning new languages and getting to know new cultures. And so for him, Japanese Sign Language is another new language to learn.
Right.
And he's fascinated by her. Meanwhile, she, because of the limitations of the available educational options for her, she's lived kind of a sheltered life. And so she's dazzled by the fact that he's been able to travel all over the place. And the author, Sue Morishita, again, did a lot of research into, what it's like to be a deaf person in Japanese society. But at its basic level, it's just a wonderful piece of sequential art because of the economy of emotional storytelling. You get to know the characters just through the smallest hand gestures and facial expressions. And like with a lot of manga, it's the pages that aren't covered with a bunch of lines that are the ones that stick with me the most, because every stroke matters and says something. And so that was a real delight. I'm editing that series, and it's been a fantastic journey to go on, just because the dialogue and the art and everything works together so beautifully to tell the story they want to tell. Oh, and it, I find it intensely relatable because they're both early 20s, hormonal. And so there's so much subtext. It just like oozes off the page sometimes. I'm like, whoa, we really think that each other are attractive, don't we? Yes, you do, don't you?
The long, lingering looks from across the room. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds amazing. I'm going to have to check both of the titles you've mentioned out. I have deaf family, so as soon as you said sign, I went, oh, that's a pun. The title is a pun, a sign of affection. That's perfect.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any of your favorite titles in the Kadancha catalog? I guess we talked about that one. Are there any others that are older or any hidden gems you're like, oh, I wish more people knew about this one? Shout out your faves. Give it. Linked in my reading list. Not that it needs it.
Hidden gem, but Akira, obviously. I have to
yeah.
It was amazing. We have that box set that we put out. That was the first time that it's been issued in the right to left reading format. And I highly encourage people to check that out. I think it brings a whole new perspective to that series. And that's one that I get something different out of every time I read it.
Wonderful.
Now that it is, now that we're living in Akira world, because AD 2019 has come and gone.
Oh God. Yeah, it's true.
And of course the Tokyo Olympics in 2020, which Akira also predicted. And there was a pandemic referenced in Akira as well. I don't know if, it's creepy actually. A lot of people have been talking about like the Akira curse.
I have 2 volumes of Akira on my shelf. I think they're the flip-flopped version that are left to right. But I haven't. I need to reread because I forgot all of these things. But now that you're saying it, it's all popcorning back into my brain. I'm like, oh no, that really was prophetic, wasn't it?
It's incredible. It does not read like a comic from 1982 at all. It reads as totally timeless and super modern. It's just one of those works that you can keep coming back to. What else am I really enjoying? Cells at Work is wonderful.
Yes.
That's one that's just coming to an end. It's come off hiatus, and the last volume 6, is coming out this year. We're also publishing 2 spin-offs in print from that. Cells at Work Code Black, which is set in a very unhealthy body. So the conceit of Cells at Work is that each character is a cell in a human body. So they deal with stuff like getting a bump on the head or cedar pollen allergy, And then cancer is the big bad, and it's so there is bad stuff in there. But Cells at Work Code Black, Chapter 1, the body is addicted to smoking and drinks a lot and is chronically sleep deprived, and there's all of these pre-existing issues. So the reason it's called Code Black actually is that there's a term in Japan called a black company, a black kigyo, which is a reference to a company that is abusive, basically, of its employees. It's a hostile work environment, I guess, is the term that we would use in the U.S. And so the conceit is that this body is a hostile work environment. So if you need a bit of negative motivation to improve your lifestyle, I recommend. And you're over 18, I should say. There's some 18 plus content in there.
Okay.
Then pick up Cells at Work Code Black, and you'll feel for your cells having to work in the hostile work environment.
I've been meaning to hit the gym, so maybe that's exactly what I need. Oh no. Hidden gems in your catalog, though. This is a pun. Land of the Lustrous is one of my other faves from your. Yeah. I have pretty much, I think, every volume that's come out. I need to double check and see if I've missed any, but that's another one. It's right next to Wodokoi on my shelf. And O Maidens. I have so much of your catalog in my house. It's wild. So I could talk about it until the cows come home. Just, you have so many amazing titles that you've published.
I couldn't give you a source for this, but I've heard that for Land of the Lustrous, the goal was to make a shonen on the top, shoujo on the bottom, kind of.
Oh, I love that.
Kind of characters designs, and a perfect hybrid of the two styles of manga.
I can see that.
Yeah,
Ooh.
actually makes a lot of sense. That's a wonderful, wonderful series.
I agree, yeah. So are there any upcoming releases that haven't come out that you want to get audiences hyped up about? AKA hype me up, because, I always want something new to read. What's coming out?
Yes, we are still publishing new books, even though we've been doing our best to get the reprints in and keep people getting the books that they want. I mentioned A Silent Voice. We actually have a new hardcover edition of A Silent Voice coming out starting this year. That'll be 2 volumes for the entire series. At a very large size. It'll be at the 7x10 size, so the same size as some of the other hardcovers we've done for Battle Angel Alita and some of the Clamp titles, for example. Those are going to be it's about 750 pages each, and they'll include the original one-shots that predated the series that were kind of like the trial runs for this story.
Right.
Because the artist Yoshitoki Oima put these characters through a lot of different iterations before she actually started serialization of A Silent Voice, and you'll get to see how the characters and story changed and evolved over time. The first one shot is in the first volume, and then the second one shot will be published in volume 2 next year, which will wrap up the series, and that'll of course include all the color pages as well. So that's one that I'm really enjoying being able to put together. As far as new series go, I realize I'm talking about a lot of, very sophisticated kind of instant classics, but I really like the fun stuff too. And
of course.
One that we're bringing out in print that's already been available in digital is Lovesick Ellie. You asked me about my genre preferences. I really love silly shoujo.
Who doesn't? You need something at the end of the day to take the edge off. It's perfect for that.
Lovesick Ellie is about a high school girl who narrates her fantasies, I should say, through a Twitter feed that she calls @LovesickEllie. And it's supposed to be anonymous, but of course there's the worst possible guy at her school finds out about it.
Oh, of course.
And shenanigans ensue. So we have that one coming up, which is going to be a lot of fun. In the same vein, Phantom of the Idol is another very silly shoujo about a idol group of 2 guys, one of whom is just so lazy. He's the laziest idol in the business. He doesn't want to perform. He doesn't want to do the dance moves. The group is being entirely carried by his partner, who fortunately has a huge fan base, but he's on the verge of getting fired. When he meets this, who he thinks is like a peppy fan backstage, and he's like, ugh, and she's all dressed up in her like sequin outfit and everything. She's like, oh, it's just so exciting, isn't it? He's like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Turns out, long story short, she's the ghost of a idol who died in a car accident a year earlier, and it was this huge thing because she was the voice of a generation, and then she got cut down. Of course, he doesn't know who she is because he doesn't care. Right. And they discover that her ghost can possess his body on stage. So she gets to perform in front of an audience, and he gets to have the easy life of riches that he dreamed of. And of course, there are no further complications.
Of course, none, not a one. That sounds great. When you said Phantom of the Idol, I immediately thought Phantom of the Opera. So that kind of puppeteering is, yeah, I see that.
Yep.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds great, actually. The more I think about it, the more enthusiastic I get. Wow.
I want to read that one now.
It's very cute.
Yeah.
Very, very cute.
Tom will pass it around the office when it comes out. We'll just have a little lending library of manga we can all share. Yeah,
we should start one.
I mean, I don't have room in my house for much more, so I have to dump it off at the office anyway.
There's always ebooks.
There's always ebooks. You are right.
I work with print, but no format shaming.
No, oh yeah, of course, none. I'm just I'm a magpie. I like to hoard shiny things, and for some reason, books are shiny in my vision. You mentioned the Silent Voice is going to be the 7x10, and is that the same dimensions as the Cardcaptor Sakura special editions that have been coming out?
Yes, it is. Absolutely, yeah. That's the format we've landed on for a lot of our hardcover reissues. The Akira box set is at the same size.
So I love the Cardcaptor Sakura special editions, by the way, with that kind of rose gold foil on them. They're beautiful. Like they're beautifully designed. So I can, speaking to all the manga readers listening right now, the special editions are absolutely worth it. They're gorgeous. So,
and that's actually in a higher size and a larger size than the Japanese original version.
Oh,
which is often the case. Manga is typically smaller in Japan. And I don't remember exactly who it was who said this, but at one point we proposed upsizing a manga and we heard back, wow, Americans must have very large hands. Oh, I remember. It was the editor of Sailor Moon was on stage with us at Anime Expo a few years ago. And and he said, I remember they proposed to me to increase Sailor Moon to a 7x10 size. And my reaction was, wow, Americans must have very large hands. The main event hall at Anime Expo erupted.
That is pretty funny. We're in Texas, so everything's bigger in Texas. So those volumes, they suit us perfectly. So circling back around to what you do, a lot of anime fans and manga fans are probably pretty curious about how you get into working in a field like that. Do you have any advice for people who may want to try to get into things and get into the manga world in that way?
Sure. So I think if you're looking at editorial, most places require at least some Japanese knowledge. So start right away on your Japanese language. It's a difficult language to learn. And it really does take a big commitment. But there are also other jobs available in the manga industry.
Right.
And there's a lot of demand for solid production managers, managing editors, marketing publicity, of course, as you know. And not all of these require the same Japanese language skills. If you are a well-organized person who works hard and is passionate about the material, there's a pretty good chance you could find a niche somewhere. And think about what stepping stones might help get you there too. So freelance translation work, even if it's not translating manga, commercial translators tend to, I'm a former commercial translator. Several of our editors are former commercial translators. One of them worked at a translation agency doing patent applications.
Oh, wow. So,
come at it from different angles. I mentioned earlier that I found my experience at the daily newspaper to be extremely helpful. That was not explicitly a stepping stone towards a career in manga, but it's all different skills kind of come together.
Right.
Even the biggest manga publishers, folks have to wear a couple of different hats and jump in when you need to sometimes. So it's great to be flexible and to have a variety of experience. And we are in the middle of recruiting several people to our editorial team, and a lot of the manga publishers are in the same boat as they try to staff up.
Right.
And it's been really cool to try to get a wide variety of professional backgrounds onto the team, and a variety of tastes in genre, because there's a fan dividend that pays off when you're able to pair someone with material that they personally love. It's just going to turn out better.
Yes.
Sorry, I felt like that was a very rambling answer to your question, but
No, I thought it was fascinating. I'm a copywriter editor working in the marketing department with Sentai, and I don't speak Japanese. I took Japanese classes though, so sometimes I'm able to use limited knowledge there. But you're right, there are a variety of jobs. There's a variety of ways to get in, but that was very helpful advice. Thank you.
I hope so. I miss doing conventions these days because I got to meet so many people who were so passionate about this business. Yeah. And, One day.
Yeah, same. COVID really did throw a wrench in quite a lot of things. It was good for the industries in a lot of ways, but yeah, I do miss the convention circuit a lot personally as well.
Yeah.
So I have a wild card question for you.
Ooh.
And I ask this to everybody because I love asking this question. And it is, what didn't we talk about that you wanted to talk about? This is carte blanche. Run wild. You want to talk about your grocery bill? You can do that. Do whatever you want. But yeah, what have we not gotten to that you want to talk about?
Well, can we go back to Vinland Saga?
Yeah, well, of course. Yes, please go back to Vinland Saga.
So, Vinland Saga, one of the things I really, really love about it is the theme of pacifism.
Okay.
And Yukimura Sensei talks about this in his afterwards, but he set out with Vinland Saga to create a shonen action manga with a pacifist protagonist. And even that is a little bit of a spoiler, so I guess retroactively, don't have listened to the last 45 seconds if you haven't. Sorry.
We'll stick a spoiler tag at the beginning of the episode. Yeah. It'll be fine.
A little bit. But it's a very unique project in that sense. And there's a lot in there about father-son relationships specifically, both in the protagonist and in his foil, his kind of opposite, King Canute, who's the king of Denmark, who also has very different kind of daddy issues.
Sorry, the way you said that was accurate and hilarious at the same time.
But the parallel quests that they set out on to change the world in very different ways, I think, have a lot. That commentary has a lot of relevance to the societies that we're all living with now, where we are deciding what we as a human civilization want to be about in the future. And so I think that Yukimura Sensei is thinking very deeply about these things and pouring that into his characters in a way that I find super inspiring. And when I'm feeling out of energy to think anymore, or just exhausted by the news or whatever it might be, I know that I can open Vinland Saga and be reminded of why all this stuff matters.
Right. That's beautiful. What a wonderful. Oh, sorry, I'm overwhelmed. That's beautiful. I'm gonna look at this in a new way. Like, I already love this series, but thank you for that additional perspective. That's lovely.
It's a really beautiful story about forgiveness and war and guilt and human society as a whole, and how we should act to each other. And the radical moment in that early part of the series where Thorfinn, as a little boy, is, taking the swords from his father's chest, and his father has taken them back and grabbed them with his bare hands. And he's said, who are you going to fight with these swords? And the little kid says, my enemies. And Thor says, you don't have any enemies. No one has any enemies. It's a radical statement.
It is.
And when you see it, there's almost the temptation, and this, I guess, getting back to the localization process, there's almost the temptation to soften it, a little bit when you're creating the English version. It's like, well, okay, in Japanese, does this just come across as less out there? But no, that would have been wrong. It has to be there because it's the core statement of the series. It's where the entire rest of the thousands of pages of this series are going to go.
And given a lot of people like this for the bloody action, and there's a kind of an irony in that, and that statement paired with what some people find appealing about the series, and they're not wrong for finding that appealing necessarily, but that irony is too sharp to ignore.
Read the afterwards. Yukimura Sensei talks about that. It's like, I realize I'm here to entertain you.
But well, we have had a wonderful discussion. Where can we find you online so we can keep getting more of this perspective and keep in touch with you?
I am at Ben Applegate on Twitter, and I'm always happy to chat with folks who want to blather about the manga industry. I also put lots of silly stuff up there too, so fair warning in advance. And hopefully, soon, maybe New York Comic Con, Anime NYC, when the convention scene comes back, I'd love to see folks there too.
Yeah, I hope we run into each other. Yeah, you have been fantastic. This has been a wonderful interview. Thank you so much for coming out with us today and talking about all things manga and Vinland Saga. Everybody, Ben Applegate, fantastic human, wonderful interviewee for the record. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, well, this is the Sentai Podcast signing off today. And thanks everybody for listening. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Sentai Podcast. This episode was brought to you by HiDive, where you can stream thousands of hours of anime for $4.99 a month. Visit hidive.com for details. Special thanks to our guest Ben Applegate, our host Sam Butler, our producer Tom Helberg, and our editor Connor Clifton. Thanks for tuning in.